Senator Heitkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not for reply, but I find it ironic almost that the mantra on the Affordable Care Act is the concern about if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, except if your doctor is employed by Planned Parenthood. There is a certain amount of hypocrisy to that statement. So I move beyond. One of the things I want to examine, which is your position on Social Security. You've said that you wouldn't affect anyone who's 60 or over, right? So it wouldn't require that they wait until they're 70 in order to basically access Social Security program. That means a 59-year-old oil rig worker would now have to work until they're 70. But that's hard work, I can tell you that, and lots of problems in terms of health care and maintaining. But yet my husband, who's a physician who maxes out on the cap, he's not asked to sacrifice anything. And he can clearly work until he's 70 because he's not working outside in the elements. I'm not sure I understand how that philosophy could ever be consistent with the president who has really, I think, spoken to that oil rig worker saying, we're on your team, we're on your side. So I just ask you to be really careful when you look at broad generalities, especially as it relates to Social Security. And especially when every person here gets a tax break every year when they reach the cap. So if we're looking at solving the problem of Social Security, and we recognize you all took a pledge, but that pledge isn't necessarily good public policy. And so, you know, from my standpoint, we've got to solve the problem, but we have to be intellectually honest about the other side of solving this budget crisis. And so I'm going to ask, you know, you said in response to Senator McCain's discussion, you said, look, we're going to cut domestic programs to basically plus up on the defense side. Obviously, Oko, you and I can share an opinion about whether that's real money or not. But let's examine on that domestic side, non-defense domestic, where are you cutting? Because programs like funding for flood control programs are critically important to my state and important to those same folks who live in fixed in housing where they're going to see huge increases in their flood insurance without a flood program. So we have to be really careful about how we do this and how we respond to the needs of the American people. So right off the bat, not looking at entitlement, so-called entitlement programs, where would you see an opportunity to cut domestic spending?
Senator, thank you. And I've read, as I believe I may have mentioned earlier, the two hearings are starting to run together, that I've read some of the same things you did about the early versions of the budget, but I've not been involved with those. So I have no idea what the proposals are or even if the reports have been accurate. I think the rules are that I'm supposed to be excluded from that, which I agree with. So I'm not familiar with the proposals that the President has made.
I'm really concerned, and I think we can take a look at Medicaid funding. And we can say if we stop research on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, you think you got a Medicaid funding problem right now? You're going to have a bigger Medicaid funding problem going forward. And so let's not be so quick to criticize things like flood control and the domestic programs, because those are investments that could, in fact, on the long run, save our budget and really, I think, make investments. I don't have a lot of time. I want to get to the XM Bank. I'm probably a one-note frequently person here, but for the life of me, I do not understand, other than kowtowing to maybe folks who write things like crony capitalism, why there would ever be opposition to the XM Bank. We've got billions of dollars of export financing in the pipeline right now that could mean American jobs. In fact, in your own state, we have lost thousands of jobs in South Carolina because we haven't had a quorum on the XM Bank. this should be a no-brainer. Explain to me your opposition to the EXIM Bank and why you took the position that you took.
Sure, and again, you're asking about something that I did when I was an
Right.
elected official. I'm hoping to change that. But if the president came to me and says, Mulvaney, what do you think about the EXIM Bank? I would try and lay out for him some of the impacts it has on the market, about favoring exporters over domestic producers. The example is fairly easy to give to the president. Mr. President, if Senator Heitkamp and I are both in the business of making glasses, and she happens to export some of hers and I do not, we compete domestically, but she also exports. She has advantages that are available to her, low-interest financing, can buy equipment cheaper, that she can use to compete against me that actually come from the government. And I think that warps the marketplace and puts our purely domestic producers at risk. To the larger point about, is there a better way to do it? I did participate in and would be happy to talk to the president about some of the ideas that came out of not a bipartisan group, but a Republican group that included people who were opposed to the EXIM Bank and those who supported it. And I think one of the things that there was some rally support for was using the bank as a true lender of last resort.
Well, I'd be curious about all that, because obviously I was heavily involved in negotiation of the reauthorization and very concerned about what's happening right now with export finance. I did have a chance to talk to then President-elect Trump, who I believe has some varying opinions about the EXIM Bank than what you do. Finally, I want to extend the opportunity to work on reg reform. Senator Portman and I are in discussions along with Senator Langford. We think that there's a real opportunity here. We want to make sure that reg reform gets done sooner rather than later, and that we have a process that provides a real opportunity for Americans to participate and a real cost-benefit analysis that we can all evaluate. I think it's critically important. Last point I want to make is carried interest. And, you know, we've talked so much about the expenditure side, but I like to make this point. That same rig worker pays a higher percentage in tax than someone who has the good fortune to be born into a family with a trust fund. There's some real problems with that as well. And so I would ask you to at least consider the other side of this and eliminate what I consider inequities to the working people in this country.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.